Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a genuinely fascinating stack of sources on the table today, and it's centered around this really unconventional text.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. It basically takes the gritty, hard-won wisdom of traditional addiction recovery and merges it with the ancient Chinese philosophy of Wu Wei. So our mission for you today is to unpack this profound question the author raises. Basically, how do we learn not just to stop a destructive habit, but to stop the exhausting internal struggle altogether?
It's an incredibly unique pairing of ideas, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I mean, on one side, you have the raw, clinical, literally life or death stakes of overcoming addiction.
Yeah, the heavy stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have this thousands of years old Taoist concept of effortless action. And merging them creates this completely different framework for understanding how the human brain actually finds peace.
And to get into why that framework is so necessary, we really have to start with the story the author shares because it's incredibly relatable.
Oh, absolutely. The morning routine one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they describe waking up on an ordinary day. They have a solid period of sobriety under their belt. There were no arguments the night before, no looming financial crisis. People in their life trust them again. Like everything is objectively stable.
Right. On paper, it's a great day.
But they wake up and their chest is just tight. Their mind immediately starts reviewing random conversations, you know, scanning the horizon for a threat, wondering if they made some invisible mistake. By mid-morning, they realize they are treating a perfectly peaceful day like a four-alarm fire.
Which perfectly illustrates a massive gap in how we traditionally view recovery. Because we tend to focus entirely on the behavioral outcome,
Right? Did you do the thing or not do the thing?
precisely. Programs are brilliantly designed to teach people how to put the drink down or how to walk away from the substance, but they often leave the underlying mechanism completely untouched.
That engine of internal resistance.
Yes, the resistance and the anxiety. The author realizes that they're carrying the exact same restless, frantic energy that used to drive them to drink, only now they're just sitting there, completely sober, vibrating with tension over a cup of coffee.
I actually like to think of it as phantom limb syndrome, but for stress.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, because the emergency has been amputated from your life, the crisis is physically gone, but your brain hasn't caught up to reality, so it's furiously bracing for an impact that just isn't coming.
That is exactly what is happening on a neurological level.
Mhm.
But to understand how to get from that exhausting tension to the emotional release of effortless action, the text argues we actually have to start at the opposite end of the spectrum.
We have to look at the brutal, uncompromising reality of addiction itself.
Yeah, the physical reality of it.
And the author definitely does not sugarcoat this part, like, at all. They assert that addiction is a chronic, fatal disease. And by chronic, they mean permanent.
Right, there's no getting cured and going back to normal.
Exactly. The text establishes that there is no cure except what they call absolute absence. Without it, the binary outcomes are jails, institutions, or death. It's an incredibly rigid biological baseline.
It is. And to explain how this disposition works, the author uses this really stark analogy about a medicine cabinet. It's designed to separate the moral failing of addiction from the actual biological trap.
Okay, walk us through that.
So imagine you visit a friend's house and you decide to take a pill from their medicine cabinet that was prescribed to them by a doctor. On day one, by making that choice, you are technically a drug abuser.
Because it's a behavioral choice. I'm choosing to abuse a medication that isn't mine.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It is an action. But then you visit the next day, day two, and you take another pill because you want to recreate the exact same feeling you got the first time.
Okay.
Now, the text argues you have crossed into being chemically dependent. You are relying on an external substance to regulate an internal state.
And then day 3, you show up, take another one, and the author states that you are now addicted. But I have to stop and push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because if I am reading this with a critical eye, taking a pill for 3 days and fundamentally altering my biology sounds like, well, a bit of an extreme exaggeration. What is actually happening in the body to make a claim like that? Is it a literal 3-day ticking clock?
Well, it sounds like an exaggeration if we take the 3 days literally. But the author is using it to illustrate a rapid, invisible threshold. For someone with the genetic or biological predisposition, that first pill doesn't just create a mild high.
It does something more drastic.
Yeah, it literally floods the brain's reward center with an unnatural tsunami of dopamine. So by the second day, the brain's neuroplasticity is already kicking in. It senses that massive spike and downregulates its own natural receptors to compensate.
Oh, wow. So the brain is essentially saying, oh, that was way too much dopamine. I'm shutting down my own production facilities to balance things out.
Exactly. So by day 3, your baseline homeostasis has fundamentally changed. You aren't just taking the pill to feel high anymore.
You're taking it just to get back to zero.
Yes, you are taking it because your brain has altered its chemistry to the point where you need the substance just to feel normal. You might go years without realizing when that invisible line was crossed, but your body changed.
That's terrifying, honestly.
It is. And this is why leaving a detox center doesn't magically cure the illness. The physical receptors in the brain have been fundamentally rewired.
And the text actually points back to foundational recovery literature to back this up, right? Specifically referencing the doctor's opinion, which makes up the first 4 chapters of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right, very classic text.
Yeah. And the argument is that a person cannot move forward until they reach what page 60 calls being convinced. Like, you have to be fully convinced of this biological reality that your body will never process these substances normally.
Which is a tough pill to swallow, no pun intended.
Right. But this raises a huge flag for me. If the text paints addiction as this permanent, fatal biological trap with no cure, doesn't that inherently breed the exact anxiety and tension the author woke up feeling?
Oh, absolutely it does.
Right. Isn't this model setting people up to stay in a defensive, terrified fight mode forever?
So that is the ultimate paradox of early recovery. Yes, the gravity of the illness absolutely breeds terror, and early on that terror is actually functional. It keeps you alive.
Because you have to be vigilant.
Exactly. The author refers to a concept called TIME, things I must earn. In early recovery, you earn your life one day at a time through sheer vigilance. When you are fighting a fatal illness, you need the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response, to keep you on high alert. You are literally fighting for your survival.
But survival mode is exhausting. You can't live at a level 10 forever.
And that is the exact pivot the author makes. Once the urgency of early sobriety passes and the physical danger is mitigated, a new hidden obstacle emerges. Your brain gets stuck.
Stuck in that high alert state.
Right. You've stopped the behavior. You put the drink or the drug down. But your nervous system hasn't gotten the memo. Your amygdala is still sounding the alarm.
Which brings us to why that phantom limb analogy is the perfect lens for this. The brain literally has to rewrite how it perceives threats in everyday life. And the text introduces this concept called drink time.
Drink time, yeah. This is a crucial concept.
It's essentially those moments when life just happens, a stressful email, a flat tire, an awkward social interaction. And to explain how our traumatized brains process these normal moments, the author uses a deeply visceral analogy about a guy with a 2x4 piece of wood.
It is brilliant because it perfectly illustrates neurological conditioning without needing an advanced medical degree. So visualize sitting on your couch,
Yeah.
you hear a knock at the door, you walk over, open it, and immediately you get hit in the face with a 2x4.
Brutal. But, okay, I'm tracking.
Day 2, you are back on the couch, you hear a knock at the door, you answer it, boom, you get hit in the face with the 2x4 again.
So by day 3, I am terrified of the door. My heart is pounding just looking at it.
Right, so on day 3, you hear the knock, you creep up to the door, you slowly open it, and no one is there. The doorway is completely empty. What do you do?
Based on how the human brain works, I probably grab a baseball bat and go looking for the guy with the 2x4.
Exactly. You go hunting for the threat because your brain has been intensely conditioned to expect pain. You literally cannot accept the peace of an empty doorway.
Wow.
You anticipate the blow so strongly that the lack of a blow feels like a trap. You end up creating the conflict yourself just to release the tension of waiting for it.
And, I want you to think about your own life for a second. Even if you have zero experience with addiction or recovery, this is a universally human mechanism. How often do you ruin a perfectly good Tuesday by anticipating a disaster that hasn't even happened yet?
All the time.
Like your boss sends a message saying, can we chat later? And suddenly your heart rate spikes, you're mentally packing up your desk, and you are preparing a defense for something you haven't even been accused of.
We all do it. The text actually frames this psychological trap through an acronym often used in recovery. FEAR, false events appearing real.
False events appearing real. I love that.
It's powerful because outward appearances are not always inward realities. Your outward appearance might be sitting calmly at a cafe, sipping a latte, but your inward reality is that your nervous system is hunting for the guy with the 2x4.
And untangling that neuroconditioning takes a staggering amount of time. The author notes a saying regarding the timeline of brain recovery. They say it takes 5 years to get our brains out of hock. Then it takes 5 more years to learn how to actually use it. And then it takes 5 more years to realize we didn't need it in the first place.
That is a 15-year timeline.
Yeah. Why does it take a decade and a half to figure this out? Most people assume you do a 30-day program, the chemicals leave your body, and boom, you're cured.
Because we're talking about the physical rewiring of the brain's default mode network. Every time you resorted to a substance to handle stress, you coded that specific neural pathway with myelin, making it a superhighway.
So it became the brain's go-to route.
Exactly. When you stop, the brain has to literally prune those thick pathways and build brand new fragile pathways for coping. That requires thousands of repetitions.
Right.
The goal of emotional sobriety is deeply biological. Addiction keeps us locked in the sympathetic nervous system. The tension the author felt waking up was their sympathetic nervous system firing on all cylinders with nowhere to go.
Ah, I see.
So the ultimate goal is shifting biology into the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state.
So if willpower alone can't force the nervous system to calm down, how do we actually downshift into rest and digest? This is where the text introduces its core thesis, merging this gritty recovery mindset with the Chinese philosophy of Wu Wei. For those unfamiliar, what is the mechanism behind Wu Wei?
So Wu Wei is most commonly translated as effortless action. It originates from Taoism and represents the balance of yin and yang existing in equal flux.
Okay, effortless action.
The core observation of these ancient teachers was that the harder we force life to bend to our will, the more resistance we create. Pushing against reality just causes exhaustion. Wu Wei is the practice of moving with the current of life rather than thrashing against it.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Do it.
Because effortless action sounds dangerously close to doing absolutely nothing. If the text says, we do not anticipate, nor do we hesitate, how does a person function in modern society?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, I have a career, I have a mortgage, I have responsibilities. If I don't anticipate problems and try to control outcomes, my life falls apart. This sounds like an invitation to passive chaos.
That is the absolute most common misconception about Wu Wei,
Correct.
and the author actually tackles it head on. Wu Wei is not passivity. It is not lying on the couch waiting for life to happen to you.
Okay, so what is it then?
The text redefines the concept of responsibility to clarify this. It states, if I could respond for the way I live, then and only then I am responsible.
Oh, the ability to respond rather than react.
Precisely. Reacting is what the guy looking for the 2x4 does. He is reacting to a memory of the past or a fear of the future. Responding is dealing with what is actually standing in the doorway right now.
So you're not avoiding life.
Not at all. You still take action. You still pay your mortgage. You still do your job. But the action arises naturally from what is actually happening in the present moment, not from pushing against a hallucinated reality. The profound realization here is that peace doesn't come after life becomes entirely predictable.
Peace appears when we stop demanding predictability.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah, that is a massive paradigm shift. It completely reframes the goal. It's not about forcing the world to behave perfectly so your brain can finally relax. It's about relaxing your grip so you can actually handle the world as it is.
Absolutely.
And what's wild is that the text points out how Wu Wei is already secretly baked into Western recovery slogans. Like, people in recovery have been practicing ancient Taoist philosophy in folding chairs in church basements for decades without realizing it.
It's so true. The vocabulary is entirely different, but the psychological mechanism is identical. Think about the classic phrases you hear in those rooms. Let go and let God. One day at a time. Easy does it. Acceptance is the answer.
Yeah, I've heard those.
These aren't instructions to withdraw from life. They are cognitive tools designed to shut down the amygdala. They're invitations to stop exhausting yourself by fighting reality.
My favorite one they mentioned is the incredibly blunt reality that God leads the willing and the unwilling he drags.
It's a perfect encapsulation of resistance. If you fight the current of reality, you get dragged by it and you drown. If you practice Wu Wei, you float with it.
Wow.
Every time someone in recovery drops their rigid opinions, pauses in the middle of an argument, and asks themselves, could I possibly be wrong here? They are practicing Wu Wei. They are dropping the struggle.
So we're talking about a fundamental shift from a life driven by ego and management to a life driven by awareness. But putting this philosophy into practice requires flipping our standard logic completely upside down. To explain this shift, the text outlines several paradoxes of healing.
Yeah, paradoxes are central to both the Big Book of AA and the concept of wu-wei. To heal the brain, we have to embrace things that seem utterly contradictory to our survival instincts.
Like what?
Well, the text points out foundational phrases like die to live, surrender to win, give it away to keep it.
And the text also highlights this fascinating linguistic pivot, playing with the letters of words to demonstrate cognitive reframing. For example, the shift from being scared to being sacred.
Oh, I love that part.
Right, it's the exact same letters, just a slight rearrangement of the C and the A, but psychologically it moves you from a state of terror to a state of reverence, or the shift from nowhere to now here, same exact spelling.
Depending on where you put this space, you are either lost in a void or you're deeply, powerfully present.
Exactly. The concept of spacing is everything.
It is. It requires a completely new perspective on the same set of facts. The text calls this getting a checkup from the neck up, which is essentially the psychological purpose of having a sponsor in recovery.
Right, because you can't always trust your own brain.
Exactly. When your amygdala is hijacked, you literally cannot see reality clearly. You need an outside observer to tell you where you are misplacing the spaces in your life.
And to help ground that awareness, the text introduces a technique it calls the three unchangeables. It is now, I am here, I am E.
It's a brilliant grounding exercise.
Yeah, if your brain starts hunting for the guy with the 2x4, you anchor to those three absolute truths. You force the brain out of the false events of tomorrow and back into the physical reality of the present.
Which brings us to a stunning excerpt the author includes from the poet Khalil Gibran. It beautifully synthesizes everything we were talking about regarding the need for space.
Yes, I really want to pull this quote because the visual is so striking. Gibran writes, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness. For the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow."
If you think about the architecture of a temple, the pillars have to stand apart to hold up the heavy roof. If you push them together out of a desire for control or closeness, the entire structure collapses under its own weight.
And if we connect that back to the very beginning of our deep dive, that story of the author waking up with crushing tension on a perfectly fine day, it makes so much sense. Just like an oak tree needs physical space to grow, our minds need psychological space from our own constant management.
Yes. The author writes, awareness interrupts automatic struggle.
When they were sitting there with their coffee, feeling that tension, they didn't try to solve it. They didn't try to force the anxiety away. They just paused. They created space. And in that space, the tension naturally dissipated.
This does raise the ultimate question, though. How do we actually manifest this in daily life? In Wu Wei, there is a saying the author highlights, only the doer learns.
Meaning you can't just intellectualize your way to peace.
Exactly. You could read all the poetry, you can understand the neuroscience of down-regulating dopamine receptors, you can memorize the paradoxes, but unless you actually execute it, nothing changes.
You have to do the work.
You do. It requires the active daily practice of noticing your own inner resistance, feeling your jaw clench, feeling yourself gripping the steering wheel of life too tightly, and simply making the physical and mental choice to open your hands.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Let's trace the arc of what we've uncovered today. We started with the uncompromising biological reality of addiction, the terrifying understanding that it fundamentally alters the brain, forcing the nervous system into a hypervigilant survival mode just to stay alive. We recognize the exhausting, universally human habit of constantly looking for the guy with the 2x4, anticipating pain and creating our own conflict even when the doorway is completely empty. And finally, we discovered the profound biological and psychological relief of Wu Wei, the effortless action of responding to life rather than forcing it, a philosophy that is miraculously hiding in plain sight within the simple, paradoxical wisdom of recovery.
It is a journey from the brutal reality of the physical body to the liberating reality of the present mind. The problem the author faced that morning was never the day itself. The problem was their brain's conditioned resistance to the day.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to explore on your own. We've talked a lot about physical threats, old habits, and the brain's 15-year timeline to rewire itself. But I want you to think about how this applies to the modern world right in your pocket.
Oh, that's a great point.
Think about your smartphone. In many ways, the constant ping of notifications, the endless doom scrolling, the anxiety of unread emails, modern technology has created a digital guy with a 2x4 that hits us with microdoses of stress all day long. We anticipate the ping, we check our screens even when they're blank, constantly hunting for the next crisis.
It's exhausting.
It really is. So how might you apply the effortless action of Wu Wei to your digital life today? What happens if you stop demanding immediate predictability from your inbox, create a little space between the pillars, and let the digital doorway remain empty? Take a breath and see what happens when you stop fighting the current.